You're listening to Thanks for Making It, a podcast about exceptional creations and collaborations by artists, designers, scientists, and engineers who make things that feel magical.
Hal Wuertz, I am so excited to have you join us this afternoon. I'm excited to learn a lot more about your work outside of the classroom and about just how you think about design, how you think about the difference between good and great design, and kind of wherever the conversation takes us. And so you are joining us. Where are you right now? Where are you coming from?
Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. Yay! You're our first guest from Austin. And for those listening who don't know, Hal Wuertz is one of the instructors in the MADE program. And maybe you could just tell us a little bit, the show isn't specifically about MADE, but it's more about, design engineering and conversations about that intersection. But Hal, you've been working with the program from the beginning. So I'd love to just hear a little bit from you about that experience, why you decided to get involved and, kind of your enthusiasm for this growing space.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, I've been involved in the construction of the MADE program for about, I think it's maybe three years now.
Yeah, it started a while ago.
Yeah. And I was really excited when I heard about it initially because I went to Brown and I was a Brown student that had a passion for art and design and didn't really have a venue for it. And the amazing thing was that Brown is an amazing university. RISD is an amazing arts university, and they're right next to each other.
Exactly.
And it's just like begging for collaboration. And it was just so hard when I was in undergrad. Like, it was just impossible. It was just like oil and water. Like, it was so difficult to make these two things mesh. And so when I heard that there was an initiative to try and get it to mesh more, to figure out a way of collaborating, I was really excited about it.
For those who don't know, these campuses they are so adjacent to each other that as you walk from one to the other, you can easily feel like you're on one continuous campus. So I just wanted to highlight that for anyone who hasn't been to Providence who's listening.
Yeah, and so it's a literal it's a manifestation, literal manifestation of like how you can have such like brilliance in these two disciplines or the two ways of thinking, and they can be sitting so intertwined physically and like still have so much trouble like figuring out ways of working together and like creating things together. So it's just so much potential there. And so I was really excited to be part of it and to help a group of people who were thinking about problems in similar but distinct ways, like figure it out together. And so early on, I have a background in design facilitation and organizational design. And so I was helping the two organizations, the two universities, work together in sort of that respect. And then over time, but when we actually started launching the program, I was like, I would love to be part of this and to continue thinking about how we get these different ways of thinking to show up in a program and to show up in people's work for those who are coming through the program.
Absolutely. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background. So where are you from originally?
That's all. I might take the podcast, but my dad's a diplomat, so I grew up overseas.
Right.
So I'm not exactly from anywhere, but I've been in Austin for 8 years, so it's coming up on the place I've lived in the longest. So we can.
Okay, great.
We can go with Texas.
And you, of course, went to Brown University. And so has it been since that time that you have kept being sort of close and in the loop at Brown, or have there been some other things in between that have kept you in the Brown
lots
family?
Of other things.
All right, tell us a little bit about those.
No, I wasn't that involved really until this program. Also, I'll throw out there that IBM's really interested in this, in helping to bring design into engineering programs. And so there's an initiative at IBM where they support people going out and helping in different ways. And so I also helped at Harvard. We did because I went to Harvard for grad school. we did a HBS case study about the design and business and something like that. Anyway, so
Great.
but no, I guess so. I mean, would it be helpful? Like, just talk a little bit about like what I did after Brown and how I got to
Yeah,
where I
I think it'd
was,
be helpful
where
to
I
do
am.
that and then, lead us into your current role at IBM, and then we'll come back to Brown and Rusty.
Okay. Yeah. So after Brown, I started in design and architecture, actually. So I have a degree in architecture. I went to Harvard for
Yay!
architecture. Yay. I love architecture.
I do too.
Even when I was like, but I graduated from architecture school and I was like, nobody wants a 25-year-old to build their buildings. Like, you want a 60-year-old. Like, this isn't going to work. Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to come out and have to
Yeah.
wait like 40 years to like do some interesting.
Doing like bathroom vanity,
Yeah, that's what you'll let a 25-year-old do.
I studied architecture too. And
Oh, you did?
I had kind of some similar realization. Basically, after architecture school, I was like, well, one was the realization you're talking about, which is like, oh man, like I'm not going to get to do the things that you dream about in school until I'm 60. and that's if you're doing really well, right?
Yeah.
And then also like the time scale of buildings is, often kind of a 10-year cycle. And if you're interested in sustainable development of the kind of surrounding area, it's more like a 20-year cycle. And I was like, I don't think I have the stamina or the attention span for that kind of product cycle. And then if you think of buildings as products, then like, oh, there's all kinds of other products you could build that have a much shorter attention span cycle. But I don't want to interrupt what you're saying. I identify with what you're saying.
Yes. Well said. No, now I don't have to say that. So, yes, what Beth said. And anyway, so I graduated in architecture and I got my dream job at my dream architecture firm. And I also had a job in the technology world at Frog and at IBM. And in the end, I decided to go to IBM. And I think a major reason for that, yes, is what you're talking about in terms of time scale. And like, I wanted to be in like the thick of things. I wanted to feel like the energy of now. But also I was really interested in design research and human-centered design. And the truth is that architecture is one of the only design professions that's not really hasn't really embraced that. And I was so interested in it and I just had no formal education in it. And so I was like, I've got to go and learn about this because I was so interested in it and honestly was like doing not a great job, but an amateur job, like pulling that thinking into architecture, and I needed more meat around it. So I went into technology and joined IBM. And
can you walk us through, like, it feels like there's a step in between, right? So how do you even become interested in technology from architecture?
Yeah, when I was absolutely, and because I had like two portfolios. I had like an architecture portfolio and I had this other portfolio where I was like pitching myself as a technologist. And I had built that up during architecture school for about, 2 or 3 years of essentially working in digital physical environments. I worked with I did a project with the MIT Media Lab. I did a project with the Harvard Meta Lab. Is that what it's called? I think Meta Lab.
That's with them.
So I had done these side projects or done studios that had digital components to them. So I was building a portfolio around digital physical environments. And when I got to IBM, I had expected to work in the IoT space because IBM was doing a lot of things around smart cities. And that was my plan, that I would go to IBM and still kind of work in physical environments, but the digital side of them.
Great. And what unit is this at IBM that you started in? And then kind of where are you now? You've stayed there?
Yeah. So what happened when I got to IBM was that I was like, where's the IoT digital physical environment section. And they were like, it's upstairs. It's like to the right, take this left. And then like finally got there, and it was this like dismal corner with 2 designers in it. And I was like, okay, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
So, and then meanwhile, like in the cloud space, there were like 100, like there's other places with a lot of energy. So I didn't actually go into IoT when I got to IBM, but it was okay because I really got fascinated with the design program at IBM, organizational change. And so I essentially spent the first half of my career at IBM working in organizational design and organizational change for the design program office. So
Great.
I did that. Yeah.
What is an example of, so I'm assuming you work with clients on that type of thing. Is that right?
Yes. And the design program office is focused primarily on IBM's design transformation. So getting the 400,000 people inside of IBM to adopt design thinking practices and design practices, or to better integrate with designers. But also for part of that time, I was on a client experience team that works with clients. And so I have like 2 years of experience. Essentially, there's a lot of enterprise clients that are very interested in how IBM did their transformation. And so we help banks and manufacturers and shipping companies, et cetera, think about how to do a design transformation or integrate better design into their experiences. And so also that, yes, I've worked with clients to help them think about their organizational change.
Cool. So can you give us an example of a project, without any kind of secret details, but just an example of kind of a day-to-day projects for people to visualize what your everyday work is like?
Sure. And so now my work is different.
Okay.
And
well, take us through to
I can give examples of both, but basically 3 years ago, a spot opened up in the IoT section, and there were more designers there. And now there's 100. So I moved over into IoT and AI.
Okay, got it.
And so that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years. So
all right. So because some of our listeners are interested in figuring out, like, they're either recent grads figuring out what they want to do, or maybe they're career changers trying to figure out, how they could move into this intersection. So maybe an example from the sort of more strategic or organizational change unit, just what is that kind of day to day? And then also an example from your current IoT AI unit.
Yeah. Okay. So from the organizational change stuff, which I absolutely loved, I was a design researcher in that. And so one of the things that I did during that time was there's like the big context of this is like, just imagine IBM over 7 years hires 2,500 designers, hires, educates 250,000 people in like an online course on design thinking, like changes teams, builds up 0 studios to 100 studios worldwide, like really builds out a program. And so as a design researcher on that team, I had projects where my job was to figure out like what's working, what's not working, and how can we make it better. So for example, one of the things I did was I did a design research project where I went to 5 studios around the world and studied how they were doing their client experiences, and then created a packet presentation, set of recommendations around like what's working, what's not working, and what we should do better. And for example, one of the things that came from that is, the places where this is working is when there's a sales team that's educated. And so from that, we launched a huge initiative around educating sellers so that they knew what design was and what role it could play in the process. So
that's smart. Cool. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then in my current role, so I currently have a rather unique role in that I'm design principal. So I've managed before, but right now I'm more of like a expert or something that helps teams do better work. And so, for example, one of the things I'm doing right now is, or I was doing before I'm on maternity leave right now, but I was doing before I left for maternity leave, was creating and administering a set of heuristics that are specific for machine learning experiences. So at IBM, we run user experience reviews before every release. And we wanted to think about if, like, for experiences that are machine learning based, like, how can we help the reviewers do a better job of figuring out what's good and what's bad and how to make things better. And so before I left, I was working with teams to create a set of guidelines and heuristics so that people could do better at that review process.
Cool. Great. Well, thank you for, kind of adding some color to just your day to day. And I wonder if, I guess I have a few related questions about this. Like, a lot of the people I've talked to so far, they fell in love with, whether it's architecture or some design field or engineering, like pretty early. So I wonder, like, when did you know that you were interested in one or the other of these disciplines?
I have a current belief, and I don't know if in the next 20 or 30 years it'll change. So my wisdom is very specific to like someone in their 30s.
Yeah.
But my someone in their 30s wisdom is that I feel like people know really early what their passion is, or like it's really, and that you lose that. Like, like when you're 10 or 5.
Yeah.
And then you lose that, like, over the next, you think about it too much, or you get educated in different ways. And then you basically spend your whole life reconnecting with your 5-year-old self.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, you do it. So
for sure.
So I mean, I've, like, from the time I was like 5 years old, I was drawing constantly, and I was just doing that. And then I spent a lot of time thinking that art or design wasn't intellectually stimulating enough or respectful enough, and that there's all these other things I could do. And it's taken me, and it continues to take me time to just like settle into the fact that, like, I love design, I love art, that's what I like to do, and I have to keep on reminding myself that there's something like very natural to me about that, and that I need to listen to it.
Yeah. Did you have, like, was there someone early on in your life who encouraged that in a notable way, or did it's just you started drawing and loved that?
I'm fortunate to have awesome parents who just let me do my thing. But yeah, it was just from the very beginning. Like, in the beginning, I draw hands constantly. Like, I had like a 3-year period where I would draw my hands.
Yeah.
I know. I would just like draw my hands over and over again. I had a horses phase. I just drew horses over and over again. Like, I was just like always visualizing things, and that continued into middle school and high school, and so.
And your major at Brown initially, I know Brown is kind of, that's not, you don't pick your major for a while, but how did you think about it then? Was the plan to do art in some way?
That's along in the same vein of that same story. I have a philosophy degree, which also came very naturally to me. Yeah. Like, it wasn't something I had to think about, but I actually had enough credits to have an art degree, and I didn't get it because I was like, I don't know if that's sending the right signal.
What? Oh my gosh, that's really
what I thought. That's what I thought at the time. Is I was like, I don't know if I want people to think that, like, I have an art degree. And as I said, like, then it took me time. It took me to, like, in my 30s to, like, really sit into the fact that it was like, hell, like, let's be honest here.
Totally. And, like, how badass is that to have both? That's funny, but it's also a little bit sad. But I think at that age, I felt that way a little bit too. Like, got so many people would sort of caution you about going forward with the arts, that it felt like negative somehow. But it feels like it's maybe changed. It feels like that narrative is a little different for people at the same age these days. Do you think so?
I don't know. I'm not sure. And I'm not sure how much of that is just like I don't know how common what if that is common. It wasn't like my parents were sitting there like, you have to be an engineer. But I just thought there was something, a lot of people with philosophy degrees go into law, and
Yeah.
I just thought there was something a bit more respectful about that. But the truth was, I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a designer. So it
Right.
was just like fighting a natural impulse that took time for me to accept in myself.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Well, the next question that I have for you is actually a little bit philosophical, but applied to design. And that's, how do you think of the difference between good and great design?
I love this question. So fun. Should we start in philosophy, or should we start with
Sure. I mean,
examples?
we are very clear on the show that there's, no right answer, but it is an interesting discussion.
Yeah. I mean, I thought about this, and I did think it was helpful to think about it through examples, but I think I'll just think about it. Let's talk about it through
Yeah,
examples, because I think
sure.
it's easier for people to visualize.
Yeah.
So the first thing that came to mind for me when I thought about this question was, I just had a baby in March. And so when you have a baby, you like go through this like whole new buying cycle, and you have to you have to evaluate all these new products. Like there's all these new things, and you have to think about all of them and like why you'd want one over the other. And so all these new things came into my life.
Yeah.
And so when I thought about design most recently, that's a lot of, I was like, oh, this thing, this thing, this thing. And so my favorite thing that we bought over the last few months is the Stoke Trip Trap chair. Do you know it?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh,
Tell me
it's
more.
good. It's good. And I think it's a good example of, I think it captures a lot of what I think is great design. So for people who are just listening, the Stoke Trip Trap chair, it's made of wood. It's very simple. It's just like an L, and then in the L, there's a couple pieces of wood that you can move up and down so that it's a chair, and it fits a 6-month-old all the way into an adult. And then there's attachments. Yeah, and there's attachments that you can. It's amazing, and there's attachments that you can add so that a baby can use it from like the moment they come home from the hospital.
Huh.
And it's really beautiful and simple. And I've wanted one for a while, because I have friends who have them, and I've seen their 5-year-olds sit in them. And right now my 3-month-old is sitting in it. And when I thought about, like, I think that might be one of the only products that I bought for my baby that I would put in the great design category. And I think it captures a few things. I think overall, like overall, there's a quality of like time, like it's lasting, that I think is really important. And I think there's like so many facets to this idea of like it lasting. Like I expect to have this chair for like potentially 18 years. Like it's possible. It's beautifully made. I plan to buy another one. Like they fit well. Like they bring the child into the dinner table setting in a really seamless way. So this idea of lasting, like great design is something that lasts, I think is a good metric. And it's in terms of the multidimensionality of the thing, right? Like this is something that's flexible to human needs. And so it's so flexible that it doesn't have to be thrown away. It can like fit in different scenarios. It lasts in terms of it's well made. Like it's hardy. It's not going to go away. It's like it was designed to be used for 18 plus years. And so it's made in a way that has that structure. And then also it was designed in the 70s, and it's the same chair. It's like 50 years later, and it's the same chair. And so there's just all these different ways in which like it's something that lasts a long time. Like, and I think that I think that's true, that good or great design is revealed with time. That if you can buy something or have something, and that it will be time that really tells whether or not this is something that is well designed. Anyway, I think that shows up in a lot of different, we can talk about other things that are really well designed, but I like the way that is such a graphic representation of like meeting human needs over time and being flexible and lasting with someone.
Yeah, I love that example. And I love the way that you think about this question. So I totally am going to want to hear more examples. This particular example I love for a couple of reasons. One, because I don't know this chair, and I know a lot of chairs. And so I'm kind of like, I feel like I have a pretty good visual just from your description, and it's going to be so fun to go then see it. But it's, yeah, well, and we'll be able to put an image of it on here for the video. But the other thing I love about it is, like, when I was first interested in design a long, long time ago, I was really interested in sustainable design. And that is a goal that today is still, pretty elusive. And often we're talking about user-centered design these days. And like, if it depends on how many, points in time you measure that, right? And so this chair example, there's the user-centered design of the searching experience, of the buying experience, of the first use experience, of the, 3-month experience, of the 10 years experience, of the, 50 years experience. So this product can allow you to kind of, I'm just giving some extra language to what you put so eloquently, it would pass that test. Whereas like another product, I don't know, these eyeglasses or whatever, it's gone from my life by a few years, right? And so it would fail kind of all of those extra tests from now until 50 or whatever. And it's just sort of interesting that you could measure that in a way of like, if we measured user-centered design in a kind of 50-year arc, most of our products would fail.
Mm-hmm. It did make me think about sustainability and just like the human's relationship with the environment, with physical things outside of ourselves. And if there is something, if there's something built in or natural about our relationship with the things around us and us wanting them to last. And I think that there is, because I think that, like, when I thought of all different examples of great design, it comes up over and over again. This good feeling that you have when something is made well or made to last or made to be part of your life and isn't disposable.
Yeah.
And I think as a result of it not being disposable, you form a relationship with it, that it's something of meaning to you. It's something that you can care about. And whether or not we're like completely tapped into that as individuals in our daily buying cycle is a different matter. Like whether we understand that, deep enough of it, so that we surround ourselves with things that have that good feeling is another matter. But I do think, right, like even though there's something aesthetically pleasing about a lot of things at IKEA, I don't think I don't think I could put those things at the level of great design simply because they're not made to form that long-lasting relationship with someone or like be something that's in someone's life for a long period of time. So I think there's something interesting there, or that like maybe there's something that is natural to us about having things in our life that are good for the environment or like not disposable or persistent.
Or I guess if we think of objects as extensions of ourselves in some way, and the things we surround ourselves with probably are, we can make a good argument for that anyway, that some of them, reflect back a kind of longevity that we hope for ourselves. Maybe that's a little, it's a little too deep probably for product, but
I don't know.
It's interesting.
I think that I agree with you. It's like maybe going too far, but like, I think that it reminds me of, I wish I could remember. I'm so sorry if this person's listening to this talk right now, but I don't remember who showed this, but it was like a talk I watched who showed like a Nalgene bottle and how people like put stickers all over their Nalgene bottles and just like, or like their computer screens and like people are just stickering the whole thing. Because of that exact point around like how the things that we own, like we want them to become ours and that they represent our identity, and that people just have this impulse to like cover things in their own stickers and like make it theirs beyond just like, oh, I need to know that this math book is mine and that's not mine. So So I do think there's something real there around like the objects that we surround ourselves with and them contributing to our identity. And they do, right? You're the sum of the 5 objects you spend the most time with or something.
Yeah, and even, yeah, I feel like we could talk about this for a long time. But yeah, I mean, you can feel it when you're surrounded by crappy stuff. You can feel the difference between a really cluttered room of junk, which can be inspiring if you're just looking for inspiration for how things are made, but it's not relaxing in a kind of calming way that being kind of surrounded by symbols of your identity in a way that feel cohesive with who you want to be. I think me, but I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm going too far, but I did have a question in there about, it was about sustainability, but we can move to a different product if you want it. Different lens.
I mean, one of the things that, I mean, to build on that conversation, and like another thing that I thought about in terms of great design or like the things around me that, I mean, there's something in the same vein, which are like, I don't actually have a pair of these yet because I've only been in Texas for 7 or 8 years, but I'm married to a Texan and he has 2 pairs of Lucchese boots. And I've been like searching for mine. I haven't found like my exact fit yet, but I think, right, there's something in there in terms of like being well made, definitely the flexibility, like you can dress these things up, you can dress them down, you can be on the ranch, you can go 2-stepping, all sorts of things. But also I think like this idea of maintenance with them, like there's something that is built into like Lucchese boot or a Le Creuset pot that they're meant to be used, and at the same time, like it makes you want to take care of this thing because they're supposed to last a long time. And it's just another couple examples along that idea of like sustainability or like things that are well made and therefore they inspire care. And
a relationship, as you were saying before.
Yeah, and as in a relationship, right? Like that, because as soon as you start putting yourself into something, right? Like you've invested time in this thing, like you've patched those pants so many times, or like you've like gotten these boots resold so many times, that in that process is where a relationship comes from. And I think great design can inspire that. It can inspire care, and from that it can inspire, someone to have a long-term meaning associated with this thing. And it's got to be something in there that separates like good versus great design.
Yeah. Well, it would be interesting to think about what types of products you kind of want that depth of a relationship with versus sound like a toothbrush. I'm not sure. But maybe if you just, swapped the part that needs to be disposable. But another thing that I'm hearing as you're giving these examples is, that the relationship and the care, there are also these kind of rituals of care that, rituals are part of relationships and communities, presumably, of these products, right? Like even the way that you introduce the boot is kind of like there's this identity and rite of passage that a Texan will eventually go through life. Right? So I love that. I do remember the thing I was thinking about before, and that was that the things we're talking about, we're talking about products that we admire in some ways when we say like a great product. And, there may be this gap sometimes between what we admire in terms of great design and what we make, in terms of the day-to-day convenience and constraints of the design process. So just kind of thinking about that. I would love to live in this world where everything is these types of products, and also where product search was possible by these types of kind of, less tangible things. We could search maybe not by color, but by relationship that we want to have.
Oh my gosh. That would be amazing.
Do you have other examples?
Yeah. I mean, I would just like I think a product that I think when I think about great design and I'm like, don't have like baby on the mind, like I've got to throw out there, like I do, like the first things that come to mind, which I think are important to recognize because they're the first things that come to mind, are like, I think Dieter Rams' universal design system, or like an Eames lounge chair. And like, so, I mean, I'm a designer, so like those things come to mind. But I do think like Dieter Rams' universal design system, like it does match the same qualities in terms of like flexibility of use, not having to be redesigned a million times, being well made, that you can still use old versions of them. And so I just want to throw that out there as like, maybe like for some people, like that does evoke like the design word. And I think it's just interesting to like test a hypothesis over and over again and to like say, oh yeah, that works. But I think when I think about that, and I think when I think about that, one what comes to mind is that while there is this like deep functionality and that being able to last quality, that I think one thing that I disagree with that is very often said about like what good design is, which is a lot of quotes around taking things away and that like good design fades into the background and all of those things. And I think that is not true at all. Like,
well,
I think
and that it's like as little design as possible.
Yes. There's a million quotes about like that's what good design is. And I think that great design has a feeling, like that it has a feeling to it. Those are positive feelings, whether it's like joy or comfort or whatever it is. But like when those things are around you, they're pleasurable and maybe subtle. I don't even want to call it subtle, but like persistent and light ways. And so anyway, in addition to like this thing where you can put it through a filter of like, does it last a long time? There's the question of like, does it spark joy or something like that? And I think that great design does spark joy. It's not something that you're like, you forget about it or you don't know that it's there. Like it makes a presence for itself.
I agree with you on like criticism of that one. Like where that takes you is a particularly minimalistic design aesthetic, which is great. It is wonderful, but it's not the only great one. And like, I think a good example is maybe hotel rooms. You know, many people have experienced a lot of different hotels, and the minimalist ones are very nice, but sometimes like really rich fabrics of many different types that have this like, you know, unbelievable harmony because of the design mind that put them together. That's also an extraordinary experience. And it's definitely not as little design as possible. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Fun. Any other examples? Or if not, we can continue on.
I have a couple more examples.
All right, let's go.
Okay. I wanted to throw, because I think the thing that you brought up around the question of like whether you want everything, like whether everything has a great feeling to it or whether it's great design, like that does bring up something that I'm not sure in terms of categorization where to put this, but I think it's an interesting thing to think about, because I would also try to think about like what's like the most basic simple thing that brings me joy. And the 7th generation laundry detergent liquid.
Oh, yeah.
Do you use that?
Is this the Whole Foods brand?
I think it might be the Whole Foods brand, and the top of it, like when you squeeze it, it automatically dispenses the right amount of detergent into the thing, so you don't have to pour anything. It just squeezes it, and the cap's designed so that the right amount comes out, and it's nice. Amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And the first time I saw it, I was like, this is brilliant. And it's been like, I've been using it for 2 years, and every single time I use that thing, oh my God, this is like, fantastic. Yeah. So, and I think about that. I think about like, you know, bottom loaded freezers. Yeah. And so I think there is a category of things that is really well made, like thoughtful, is very good design. But like, if I had to like be pedantic or like separate great design from good design, like it's got to get to that level of like producing a producing some kind of joyful feeling with you consistently and like lasting a really long time. So anyway, those
I love that.
first.
That's a beautiful picture. Are there any more examples that you want to
Okay,
share?
I'll just give one more example because I would be remiss to like not put this out there.
All right, let's do it.
Which is just because I think like honestly, some of the things that I think about the most in terms of great design are in terms of like social dynamics, and I wouldn't want anyone to think that like, you know, I think the tendency is to like think about objects in our life, and so some of my favorite pieces of design that I think about constantly are like the hike and bike trail that I saw made by my house. This like workout that I go to every Thursday that's supposed to be a community workout where they like have like figured out ways of making us friends with one another.
Oh, awesome. That's
and
fun.
then like Guntal at Harvard, which is the design school there, which is a building that creates social interactions out of nothing. And so I think there's this whole category of things that is really powerful about like how you can get people to act in different ways and have social interactions that they didn't plan on having or wouldn't choose for themselves, but like makes their lives better. That is, I think it's harder for us to say that's great design because it's so much harder to like put your finger on what it means to like form a friendship or to have a happenstance like interaction with someone that you wouldn't have otherwise. So it's harder for us to say, okay, that's really great design. But it's such a complicated space and it's so interesting to
and it's also feels unlikely that that's what we would attribute it to, right? Like if you are a student in Guntal, like you could just as easily say it's because I came to Harvard or it's because I am doing this degree that I made all of these great friends and not fully see the role of the building in shaping those interactions. So there's probably some storytelling to do to make those design decisions better, maybe appreciated by the people who experience the effects of it. It also feels like this comes back to philosophy in some ways because, at the end of the day, we come into this world alone, die alone, right? And the idea that products would be able to kind of lift that for us in some way by facilitating more experiences of togetherness and friendship and love is like a very deep contribution, but one that often wouldn't get recognized as such.
Yeah, and I think that as designers, like I put all of those things. I mean, I've spent time as an organizational designer, right? And like it's so hard. You're like, what even is that? But like it's true, like that in terms of like a lot of things around service design are in this realm. We're designing the construction of human interactions, and that is the foundation of all the things that we make in the world are all like a lot of, I don't know, I might put all meaning is like about our relationships with one another. And so anyway, yeah, I think that design has the power to work and sit in that space, and that people who are doing design engineering, that's 100% part of what it means to think about making things, is not just the physical things, but our engagement with society and our engagement with one another.
Yeah, and to recognize that, even if a designer fails to recognize that they're doing it anyway, right? Like when you're designing, you are sort of setting terms of engagement, especially in digital spaces, and to not realize kind of the power of what you're doing and take responsibility for creating positive relationships rather than kind of stewing more negative relationship impulses is really important. And I don't think it's been a big part of design curriculum, and probably should be more than it is today.
We can bring it, we can wrap it up by bringing it back to the trip trap chair.
Oh yeah, let's go.
Which is just like, I mean, part of designing it in that way is so that a child has a seat at the table from the time they're 2 years old, and that they're treated like an adult. and that they have a place for themselves. And there's all sorts of Montessori thinking around the security of that and the way that a child develops in order to like have responsibility and take care of themselves and take care of others. So anyway, yeah, like there's like an object right there that has the potential to create an environment for a child that like defines the way they think and defines the way they go into the world.
You've totally sold me on this chair. It will be, it's like a new object member of our household, like probably by the next time I talk to you.
Get that sponsor lined up.
I know. Collect those. Just so people know, there's no sponsorship for this show. But yeah, there's maybe just like joyful feelings. Let's see. So I want to talk to you a little bit. You have this great experience, not only with the institutions, that I work in, that the MAID program is set in, but also your experience at IBM internally and with other organizations. And so one of the hypotheses you could say that, is behind the entire MAID program is that the field of design, which of course is not one field, but the fields of design and the fields of engineering in many ways are kind of bleeding together as the technological tools to make things change. And so I wonder, just from your point of view, what do you think about that? And like, do you see evidence for that? Do you see evidence kind of contrary to that?
I think that what is changing, is about how we make things in general, regardless of like industry, right? Like how we make things in healthcare, how we make things in government. I think how we make things is changing. And I think that's driven by like increased potential for collaboration with the internet, like speed of technology. And I think that because of that, there's these two professions, engineering, the construction of things, and design, like why we're making things, and like that are having to respond and really step up to the responsibility of that change of how we make things in general.
Yeah, and that speed, right?
Yeah. And so I think that's the transformation that I've seen in industry working with clients. And also if you just look at like universities around the United States and like all the design centers that are popping up that are essentially these like hubs for collaboration where people are saying, we're all in silos. How do we work together? How do we build things that are all going in the same direction? And so I think that design and engineering it's not that they're changing, it's that everything is changing, and they have the opportunity to step up and respond to that. And to be beacons or representations of what's possible in terms of how we make things. And I think just like that's all about, and like the thing that design brings to the table is like thinking about the human and making that a North Star. And that when you do that and when you bring a lot of thought to that, whether talking about healthcare or anything, right, that you are making things with that intention in mind and then organizing your creation around that experience and those needs.
I love that. That's so eloquently stated. I feel like it answers like multiple questions. Mine all in one. It's great.
Perfect.
Let's see, what else? I wonder if there's and there doesn't need to be, but if there is there a product or example that kind of illustrates this for you?
Illustrate
just kind of these changes and the speed and the kind of everything changing all at once. And it's okay if there isn't one, but I'd love to hear one if there is.
I mean, I think the stuff that I'm working on right now, I think is arguably representative of this, right? Like, I think stop me if this is still too vague, but I mean, like when you're thinking about bringing in like AI into a piece of technology and you're starting to, and what that means is like you're literally bringing in a new collaborator, which is data science, like a whole profession of people who for a long time, because this is so new, have been like sitting by themselves, like just trying to make it work, just trying to make it work for so long. And then like all of a sudden it's like, it's working. And now we're trying to say, okay, it's working, but we're doing this, we've been making products this other way. And so you're trying to like stuff them in from the left and the right. And like really they need to be like just woven throughout the process. And so that's a classic, like that's the thing that I deal with in my job every day, and that we're trying to figure out is like how to make machine learning processes where we're able to gather data and provide more insightful information to people, just part of our product development. And that has to do with like the speed of technology. Everything's changing so fast. We're able to do more and more and more every 6 months. So we have to integrate while we're learning. It's definitely building the plane while you're flying.
Totally.
Collaboration. There's this whole group of people that hasn't worked with this other group of people before. Like we have to create new processes for it. And all at the same time, like just making sure that what we're really doing is solving a user need, like a human problem, and organizing the team around that. And
I wonder.
No,
go ahead. I finish your thought, please.
Well, just if you want, and so specific examples of that might be like the things that we're using machine learning for are, we have a visual intelligence product that's about identifying cracks, that like working on identifying cracks in bridges so that you know that when they might fail ahead of time, right? And so there's a bunch of people, and there's a bunch of user experience around that. Like, do I trust this thing? Can I get feedback to this thing? How can I improve this thing? All sorts of stuff, right? And so that's just like a specific example of like, we're trying to create something for this use case to make someone's job easier and more comforting around like, I feel comfortable that this bridge is intact and that like I'm taking good care of it for people. And behind the scenes, there's all this speed and collaboration and trying to figure out what the right problem is to solve that's going into answering that problem in the best way possible.
Yeah, I love that example. I'm glad that you shared an example because it raises some new questions as well. You know, you have these themes of like trust and technology, of course, as a full collaborator and as a competent collaborator, but probably a different collaborator. And then you also have, you know, issues to design around for like respect of the human in the loop, you know, as for their expertise and role in helping keep, you know, bridges strong. So I love that. There's so much there. We could have a whole episode on that. But I love that it really brings to life like how many things are coming together to solve new problems or solve old problems often in new ways. I wonder if you might share a little bit more about collaboration. So when we think about, you know, all of these things sort of speeding up and coming together, there is a lot of opportunity for role overlap and confusion and a lot of things that actually will increase conflict in teams, you know, without having a bad actor of any kind. It just will increase the confusion and need for collaborative processes. So I wonder how you think about that, and maybe even how you think about the difference between kind of like a good team and a great team, and how they handle that.
Yeah. It's definitely hard in this situation because of because of all those forces that I just described. And I think like right now in my job, it's like one of the main things I have to overcome is like basically getting people to speak the same language and to have the same projects and to understand themselves as a team that's not discipline specific. I think we're pretty good at that in terms of like engineering and design or product management and design, and data science is like inviting a new person to the table and figuring out where their seat is.
Right.
You know, I like some of the most basic things are just like creating similar meetings, like sharing like what your timelines are and like how they overlap with one another, and like making sure that people know what their role is. I think that's one of the main things that as a designer on a team that I have to help people understand is like new roles that they take on in that world. So that like you now have a role in the machine learning development process that involves like identifying needs and goals early and reviewing things throughout the process, because it can take months to just design the technology behind it. And if you're not involved during that process, then at the end you are going to design an experience around a piece of technology that is not the right piece of technology. So there's a lot of stuff around like basically with a new collaborator, a new set of collaborators, that your role changes and you have to understand more fully like what new components of your role exists and how you can step up to the table with those, step up to the plate, sit at the table.
Then, it's complex, and but I think those are really good takeaways. I wonder if you have any other takeaways for either people who are looking to make a career step toward this intersection, or leaders who are looking to, improve their creations in terms of this intersection of design and engineering.
And for people who are trying to get into this space, the most important thing is like we always look for designers who are low ego. Like this isn't a world of like the, I don't know, tight
the
pants,
Starchitect,
small glasses, Starchitect. Yeah, like this isn't like design of right now is not about that. It's not the Johnny Ives designer. It's a low ego designer who's really interested in like what it's possible to make what's possible to make as a team. And so we really look for that, and I think that you'll find that all over in terms of like anything that you're making that is powerful and is going to change the world is going to be the result of a lot of people's work, not one person's work. So being low ego, staying low ego, and bringing that mindset to your work and letting it sing in your work is important.
Yeah, I don't know. And probably in the past, of course, the Starchitects were not working alone either.
No, they weren't.
But the responsibility of the narrative to be inclusive, I think it's really, really changed. And what was the next takeaway you had?
Oh, I was just thinking about for the leader, which is hard, but I guess I can only say that I think that people in teams are interested in they're interested in this problem, and they're interested in getting involved in new spaces. And so I think any success I've had is about empowering people to like figure it out. And so like saying to the people on your team, like, hey, like in this case, I'm just so in this machine learning world right now, like, hey, data scientist and designer, like come back to me next week and tell me like 5 ways where you can improve your collaboration, and like letting them own that in order to build the relationship, or just like enabling people to like letting people know that this is new and they have to figure it out is just an empowering and exciting way of telling people that like nobody knows the answer right now, and like it's your job to spearhead how this is going to work and to experiment with it.
Yeah, I love that. To just give them this kind of innovation mandate to some degree, and the excitement of discovering the solution. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for spending some time with us and sharing how you think about design. I always love these conversations, and I'm very grateful to each of our guests. So I want to thank you for your time, and I'm sure we'll see you around on campus.
For sure. Thanks, Beth. It was awesome.
Thanks for Making It is brought to you by the MADE program at RISD and Brown University, and your host, Professor Beth Altringer Eagle. Learn more at madecollaborative.org. And as always, thank you for making it.